Welcome to the show, everybody. Mike Griffith here for our Ingles on the Beat segment. We come to you each Tuesday from studio talking Georgia football. And, of course, the Bulldogs coming off a big win over Murray State, 63-17. Impressive in many ways, and yet still some things that Kirby Smart can work on. And I'll tell you this. I think the Murray State Racers, I'll start out and say this, earned their $550,000. Their coach talked a lot of junk. And I got to tell you, I thought Murray State backed it up. I thought they played hard. It was 7-7 after one quarter. Murray State actually outscored Georgia in the third quarter. They didn't quit. It went 60 minutes. Remember last year, Austin Peay, they wanted out. They wanted to cut the game short. They only played a 10-minute fourth quarter. Murray State went all 15 minutes. And Murray actually left feeling good, too. So good for Murray State, but also good for Georgia. We finally got to see some of these young players emerge, make plays, make catches. You know, to me, number one, starts with George Pickens. We all knew coming into this season that Georgia's weakness was going to be at wide receiver. They lost their top 4 or 5 pass catchers from a year ago, lost the starting tight end. Isaac Notting, he said, how in the world can Georgia fill these spots? And I don't think anybody is ready to say that the Georgia pass game is on a level with where it was last year. Not quite yet. But is it possible that the Bulldogs could be even better than they were a year ago in the pass game? I say yes. I say yes because Jake Fromm is 1 year older, and I say yes because George Pickens is a phenom. 4 catches, 78 yards, a touchdown. The lunging catch, plays like that, you just don't see those every Saturday. You don't see playmakers like that in every program. George Pickens could be a generational talent. You've heard the A.J. Green comparison. It's not going to go away. A.J. Green was probably the best Georgia receiver of the modern era, still starring in the NFL when he gets back from his injury. The thing you got to like about Pickens is that physique. I mean, this does not look like an 18-year-old young man. This looks like an NFL receiver. I think George Pickens could line up and play in the NFL right now. He's that good, folks. Now, he's got things he's got to work on. He's still learning the playbook. Kirby Smart talks about his emotion, learning to maybe keep his emotions in check. We saw George get a personal foul penalty, maybe a little too aggressive, throwing a ball at an opponent after a catch after he got hit out of bounds a little late. Georgia's got to realize he's going to be targeted. Teams are going to try and take him out of the action by getting in his head. DBs are going to constantly pick at him and try and draw more flags from him. And George Pickens is going to have to grow up very quickly because the spotlight will be shining on him for the rest of the season. Jake Fromm, team leader, talking about the things that Georgia's got to work on, but it's going to be up to Fromm, Coley, Kirby, the Georgia team leaders to bring this young guy along quickly. Georgia's national championship hopes rest on this passing game continuing to evolve. We finally saw Dominic Blaylock make a catch. Playmaker, another guy who has a chance to be a difference maker in the Georgia offense is Dominic Blaylock, another freshman. You heard Jeff Sentell write about this a ton during the recruiting process. You've seen Connor Riley do a lot of stories on both of these guys. In fact, Connor's got a story up this morning on George Pickens and beyond the A.J. Green comparisons. That there's more to this guy than just the talent and the Green comparisons. Good read this morning. So that Georgia receiving crew means so much because every team that the Bulldogs play is going to load the line and challenge Jake Fromm to beat them with his arm. Now, so far we haven't seen a ton of Jake. If you look at the SEC passing leaders, he's nowhere near the top. Kirby's managed him carefully. They don't want Jake Fromm to get hit, and you saw why. Stetson Bennett with the pick six. It was a good storyline. It was fun to pretend that Stetson Bennett could be all that. But you're throwing a pick six against an FCS team staring down your receiver, that's nowhere near being polished enough to do the things you've got to do to be a championship quarterback. Georgia's got a tremendous drop-off after Jake Fromm. The most important thing for Georgia football is to protect Jake Fromm. You do that with a good running game. You do that by staying ahead in the change. You do that by avoiding 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 5. You do that by avoiding falling behind. The good news is that Georgia's got a schedule that's conducive to protecting Jake Fromm. They also have a great offensive line. As great as that offensive line is, though, you still saw them give up a sack to Murray State on really a routine twist. Big Solomon Kenley late, coming back over in his gap, saw it out of the corner of his eye late. Jake didn't pick up on him coming through fast enough, and Jake Fromm takes a shot. And every time Jake Fromm gets hit, Georgia fans and the coaching staff, you better believe they're holding their breath because number 11 is the most important piece to that national championship. No Jake Fromm, no national championship. It's that simple. So you got to protect Jake. You got to stay ahead of the change with the run game. You got to stay ahead in your ball games. And again, the good news is that Georgia will be playing from ahead. Now I'm going to tell you why this season is already unfolding in magical fashion. Even though Georgia's still got work to do, there's enough other things happening around the Bulldogs. All the pieces got to fall, right? You got to play teams at the right time on your schedule. You got to play the right teams. We're going to get to that in a minute. But I want to take a few moments to tell you about my interview with Nate McBride yesterday. It's the first time that I've had a chance to talk with Nate McBride. And Nate McBride was a guy, and most Georgia fans know the story, a very sought-after player coming out of Vidalia, Georgia. The sweet onion city, I learned, as I did my research on Nate's hometown. But a guy that everybody wanted. Clemson, Alabama, Auburn. Very sought-after inside linebacker, was ranked among the top 5 prospects in the country coming out of high school. And having a chance to interview Nate McBride yesterday, it was interesting because you wonder, what is Nate McBride going to say? Here's a guy who came in 2017 that was expected to be a star, a standout, a can't-miss prospect. And here he is now as a junior. I don't want to say relegated to special teams because if you play anywhere for Georgia right now, that's pretty special. I mean, this is a championship program. But relative to the expectations, he is relegated to playing on kick and punt return. He's about the 3rd or 4th team inside linebacker, nowhere near starting yet. And so what was Nate McBride going to say? How is he going to handle this interview as we talk to him about these great expectations and all the fans that every time they see him probably say, man, can't wait for you to be on the field. We know it's well documented. He's one of the fastest players on the team. I believe he was a state 100-meter champ at Georgia. How can a guy this big, this fast, this strong not be on the field? And what is his attitude going to be? I was impressed. I was impressed that Nate McBride talked about team. I was impressed that Nate McBride talked about embracing his role on special teams, recognizing the value of those special teams. You've seen me on this On the Beat segment from Eagles before tell you special teams could have made a difference for Georgia winning a national championship the last 2 years. You better believe it's important. But to hear the way Nate McBride took this situation in strength, he's not upset. He's glad that there's more talent coming in. He actually said he was happy for Quay Walker, a guy that's passed him on the depth chart. He said, the guy's worked really hard. I'm happy for him. He said, the talent's going to keep coming in. I'm at Georgia. There's going to be great talent here. Kirby's going to keep recruiting great guys. And McBride looks at it like, hey, I was in that 2017 class. We got it started. And that's the approach he should take. And he said he listens to advice from his dad. And his dad tells him, Nate, it's not when you want to be on the field, it's when God's ready for you to be on the field. Now, I don't know how different people feel about religion, and certainly I don't want to gear this show in that direction, but I will say I am impressed with people that walk the walk, that have faith. And it appears to me that Nate McBride is legit. He wasn't just saying those things. He believed those things. He was looking in the eye when he was saying those things. Having players like Nate McBride in your locker room is how teams win national championships. The greatest teams that I've covered, whether it was undefeated Auburn in 93 or a 98 national championship team in Tennessee, a Michigan State team, Rose Bowl championship, they all had everybody pulling in the same direction. There's going to be competition on the team. Make no mistake about it. There's competition everybody, everywhere. Everyone wants to be the star, right? Everybody comes to Georgia dreaming of leading the Bulldogs to a national championship and then playing in the NFL. What happens when you're not first team, though? What happens when you're not in the rotation? How do you handle yourself? How you handle yourself has a lot to do with the success that team has. You have to have good teammates, and you've got to have support, and you've got to have guys like Nate McBride that say, you know what, I'm playing special teams. That's how I'm going to use my talent. I'm going to embrace that, and I'm going to pull for my teammates. And I hope that they continue to recruit better players. And I'm going to try and get better myself. And you sit back and you say, really? I mean, this guy's a junior, and he's had to go through all of this, and he's still not on the field, and that's his attitude. He's not talking about running to the transfer portal. He's not talking about cashing it in. He's not talking about I didn't get enough snaps or I didn't get a chance or avoiding talking about other players. He's bringing up other players and talking them up. That's a championship player. Now, I can't tell you that Nate McBride is going to make championship plays on the field, but I can tell you that what he does off the field is contributing to Georgia's national championship hopes. I wondered when Kirby Smart sent him out there for interviews, what's Nate McBride doing out here? I know his fans said, it's about time we wanted to hear from Nate. couldn't have handled it any better. If you haven't already seen the interview, it's on Dog Nation. Strongly suggest that you read about Nate McBride and how he's handling and embracing his role. And I think you will come away with the same impression that I did, that Nate McBride is an important part of this football team because of that attitude and because of what he brings on special teams. And we'll see. We'll just see how it all plays out. But that was something yesterday that really impressed me. Truly doing these interviews with Georgia players every week, most of them do impress me. Most of these guys, come across really well. But for Nate to dig deep, that was impressive. Because when you're a starter and everything's going good, it's easy to say all the right things, right? Also, today's story on Nolan Smith. I'll just tell you this about Nolan. I lived in the same apartment building with him just for a minute there, and ran into him a couple times. Couldn't be more polite, respectful young man. He probably didn't even know I was a reporter. I certainly wasn't wearing my badge and asking him questions about Georgia football, but just very respectful, polite, carries himself incredibly well off the field. He's everything you want in the number one recruit. Sometimes you see a number one recruit and you go, yeah, sure, let's see what happens. This kid is classy. Let me tell you, he's a pro. He will be a pro, but I mean, he handles himself like a pro off the field as well as on the field. On the field, you saw that sack, that bull rush, took down the quarterback for his first career sack against Murray State. Just so powerful. The thing that I love about him, though, is his pursuit. Watching Nolan track down a back in the open field is amazing. To see the burst out of this guy, unbelievable. Marked for greatness. Now, he hasn't started yet, but listen, that doesn't matter. He's going to play, and he's going to make plays. He is an absolute weapon. Amazing, Nolan Smith. And Kirby had a hilarious quote about him today. In the article I did, you can see that on Dog Nation, said he plays the game like his hair is on fire. I guess that's a compliment. If my hair was on fire, I'd probably be screaming and running away from everything. This guy, though, the energy level, but the pursuit. If you've got the DVR on your TV, do yourself a favor and rewind on Nolan Smith tackles and just look at the way this guy closes. And I compared him to a cheetah. I mean, the burst that he has is amazing. It's unfair. Running backs aren't supposed to get caught from behind, and Nolan Smith is going to track down a lot of guys. And if you're a quarterback, don't even think about it. I'm just telling you, get rid of the ball. Get out of the pocket and get rid of the ball. You're not going to beat Nolan Smith to the corner. Mark my words, Nolan is going to continue to ascend, as well as Jermaine Johnson, as well as Azeez Ojulari. I wrote a week ago, I thought he was the fastest rising star on defense. Azeez is a guy that can play the run, play the pass, rush the quarterback. Georgia just so talented at that outside linebacker position. Now let's talk about why this season is already starting to break down as a national championship season for Georgia. And you might say they're not playing like a national champion yet, right? We haven't seen the killer instinct. But here's what's happening. The East is crumbling. Everybody around Georgia is crumbling. We saw the red flag from Florida in their opener against Miami. Felipe Franks did not look good. Quite frankly, he struggled. He showed signs of a lack of maturity. Now, they came back and beat UT Martin, 45-0. I think it was 3-0 after one quarter. Now, I'm not going to read too much into that because I watched Georgia play Murray State 7-7 through a quarter. But still, something not quite right about that Florida offense. The defense, they've got teeth. The defense is stingy. The defense is going to pose a challenge for Georgia. There's no doubt in my mind. That game down there in Florida, in Jacksonville, just 70 miles away from Gainesville. That's going to be a tough road trip for the Dogs. It'll be a challenge for Georgia as we look ahead to their schedule. The good news is they'll have a bye week to prepare for that. But until then, we're waiting for November. Notre Dame has its share of problems already. Their starting running back is out. He's got an abdominal injury. He won't play. The guy that was number 2 has a toe injury. We'll see what he does against New Mexico. Irish, a little banged up. Ian Book, the senior quarterback, I didn't think he looked great against Louisville. Brian Kelly says that they had a very good week off. But that Notre Dame game, I think that's going to be a real treat for the fans in Athens after sitting through 2 of these quote-unquote bye games against Murray State, against Arkansas State. But after Notre Dame, the Georgia schedule, you get a bye week, and then you play at Tennessee. And as we talk about the East crumbling, we got to start with Tennessee. I didn't think Tennessee would pose that much of a challenge this year. I thought they could be difficult because Jim Chaney brings a lot of institutional knowledge and personnel knowledge about Georgia to the Tennessee program. Kevin Shear, I thought he helped make a difference last year with what he was able to share about the Georgia defense. Tennessee game is still the only game in Jake Fromm's career where he didn't throw a touchdown pass last year. I think Pruitt can scheme him up, but I think Pruitt is having a hard time getting his guys to play for him. Your players have to like you. Your players have to want to play for you. And I can't come up with any other explanation for Tennessee losing to Georgia State and BYU than the chemistry in the clubhouse. And maybe it's newer players are playing and older players are upset they're not. Remember we were talking about Nate McBride attitude a minute ago and championship attitudes. Those attitudes aren't given at other places. I know for a fact that there's people at Tennessee right now that their parents I've talked to them, they're upset. They want out. They're upset their kids aren't playing. I know there's coaches on that staff right now that are calling around. Tennessee's got a real problem on their hands. Now, they got UT Chattanooga this weekend, then they play Florida. The only way Tennessee saves its season is if Tennessee beats the Florida Gators. And I believe the only way Jeremy Pruitt's back for a third year is if he beats the Florida Gators. I think if they lose that game against Florida in 2 weeks, I think that's the beginning of the end. And I won't go any further than that because we're talking Georgia football today, not Tennessee. Let them talk about that in Knoxville. But as we look at the schedule, that's the next SEC game, and I think that's a knockdown game in Knoxville for Georgia. After that, Georgia comes home. They play South Carolina. Jake Bentley's out. He's gone. I'm hearing reports he may be in the transfer portal. Amazing. A guy that was really, I thought, the heart and soul of the program. Talked to him, seemed like just a few short months ago in in Hoover, and he's telling us about double dating with Jake Fromm because they were both dating volleyball players at the time. You're thinking, well, this is a fun story. Maybe they'll stop at the soda shop and order a milkshake too and be home by 9 while they're at it. But so now Jake Bentley out at South Carolina. They've got now their freshmen look good. They played some nobody team. I can't even come to mind to me. Nobody's significant. But South Carolina without Jake Bentley is not going to come into Sanford Stadium and put up too close of a fight for Georgia. They're just not. They're just not that good to begin with. They lost to North Carolina earlier this year, gave up a big lead. They're not going to be. They're a speed bump. Kentucky at home, October 19th. The Wildcats. They've lost their quarterback, Terry Wilson, out, patella tendon tear. So now the Wildcats have to look to a transfer. Wildcats play Florida this week. We'll find out more about Kentucky when they host the Gators. I didn't expect Kentucky to be much of a challenge. I thought their 10-win season last year was great. People got excited. Their coach won Coach of the Year. Good for them. Take a picture. It's not going to happen again in a long time. Kentucky football is not going to be winning 10 games in a season again for a long time. I need to look at their schedule. Maybe they can schedule really bad out-of-conference teams and get 4 guaranteed games. I still think it's going to be hard for for Kentucky to win 10 regular season games again anytime soon. Georgia is then off on the 26th. Another bye week. And then we get to what I've been saying, waiting for November. You got Florida on November 2nd. And listen, a lot can happen between now and then. Remember, I started this out talking about keeping Jake Fromm healthy. If Jake Fromm is still healthy, then Georgia should be the favorite to win the SEC. Again, you look at the schedule. Florida on November 2nd. Missouri, I think Missouri might actually be a little bit more dangerous than Florida. And the reason why is because I think Kelly Bryant is a better quarterback than Felipe Franks. Now, Franks has got a big arm. He's an NFL prospect. He's 6'5", 240, just got an absolute cannon. But he doesn't have it between the ears. I haven't seen it between the ears yet. I haven't seen a leader yet. Now, maybe he'll grow as Florida wins games. They could get some momentum. And I could have a completely different take on this in 3 or 4 weeks. But right now, Missouri is a more concerning game to me if I'm looking at this from Georgia's perspective because Kelly Bryant can keep plays alive and move in the pocket. And anytime you've got a quarterback that can extend plays, that's what you've got to do against a Kirby Smart defense. You've got to be able to extend plays. I really like this Georgia secondary a lot. I think these guys can really cover. And they're deep. They're very deep. Now, DJ Daniel, he's back this week from a hammy. We'll see him against Arkansas State, I believe. Probably see more Tyreek Stevenson. Those aren't even the starters. And by the way, Tyson Campbell is off to a roaring start. I know he had a hard year as a true freshman last year. I think we all thought Eric Stokes was better than him after that Missouri game last year in Columbia. Campbell is off to a great start this year. He's playing like a 5-star should play. Stokes is Stokes. So this Georgia secondary is so good that Missouri is the team from the SEC East that I think poses the biggest challenge because of Kelly Bryant's ability to extend plays. Now, who knows? Maybe they'll go off the rails. Maybe they'll have another Wyoming. I still don't know who scheduled that game in Wyoming. That's got to be the dumbest scheduling I have ever seen by anyone. It's like you want to punish somebody, you schedule a game in Wyoming. You avoid it. You buy it out. I mean, if you're serious about your team, you don't play in Wyoming. I don't even think Wyoming wants to play in Wyoming. Then you look at the rest of the schedule. The Georgia Bulldogs on the 16th, I believe that's the Auburn game, and I don't have that schedule pulled up right here in front of me, but I'll look at it right now. But that is probably the most losable game on the schedule as things stand right now, and we know how quickly things can change at Auburn. But watching Bo Nix beat Oregon, and then Oregon goes out and beats Nevada like 77-6 the next week, I'm impressed with Auburn. I'm impressed with Gus Malzahn. That's a gritty program. Auburn doesn't go away easily. Even in down years, Auburn doesn't go away easily. That's going to be a good football game at Jordan-Hare. To me, that's a game, probably the most losable game on the Georgia schedule right now is at Auburn, and yet and still, I think that's probably a 10-point Georgia win if I'm calling it right now. Then you've got Texas A&M. They're playing at Sanford Stadium. Saw A&M against Clemson. They were all right. The thing about Jimbo Fisher teams, I think this team will get better. I know that previously under Kevin Sumlin, they got worse with that high-octane, high-snap count offense. Jimbo's not like that. I think his teams are going to get better. I think that's going to be a tough team. I don't really want to call it a trap game because I don't think anybody at Georgia is real worried about playing at Georgia Tech the last game of the season. But coming off that Auburn game, win or lose, I expect that to be an emotional battle at Jordan-Hare. I think there could be an emotional letdown. And I do think that Texas A&M could prove capable. If Georgia doesn't play a good football game, A&M would be capable of beating Georgia. I don't think they will, but I think if Georgia were to have a bad night and not show up, I think a Jimbo Fisher coach team could give them trouble. And then Georgia Tech's Georgia Tech. They're just awful. Just a terrible team, an automatic win. And then the SEC championship game. So the East crumbling, though. If you're a Georgia fan, and nobody ever wants to see players get injured. I mean, certainly not. I mean, that's not the way you want to win games. But when you see South Carolina's quarterback go down, and you see Kentucky's quarterback go down, and Jeremy Pruitt is comparing his own program to the Titanic, which I don't think that's what he was going for. I think he was trying to make the point that when the ship sinks, the rats come to the deck, right? Because the water's seeping in, and you see rats on deck. But what he didn't realize was that the rats were smart for doing that because the ship was sinking and going under. And he was basically telling people that Tennessee's program is sinking like the Titanic. He should have come up with a different analogy where the ship doesn't sink or something like that because it doesn't look good in Knoxville right now. And that's going to be Georgia's next SEC game. So with the East crumbling, and there's going to be critics. There's going to be critics that are going to say, oh, Georgia didn't play anybody. The East was bad. I had this discussion yesterday sitting over at Georgia. I said, play this out. Play this scenario out. Clemson goes undefeated. Georgia goes undefeated. Is it a given that Georgia jumps Clemson in the rankings? Is that a given? And absolutely, because of Georgia's schedule. And, now Georgia will have just beaten probably Alabama or LSU in the SEC championship game, and that's a very good win. But if Clemson's the defending champ and they haven't lost yet, are they going to drop from number one? Now, you and I might say, well, of course, Clemson's schedule is awful. They played A&M and they beat them 24-10 or whatever. It wasn't even close. And then they're not going to play anybody the rest of the year that's in the top 25. I don't think. Maybe North Carolina sneaks in the top 25. I don't know. Virginia's there right now. It's almost like by default. I mean, I vote. Sometimes you get down to the bottom, you say, I got to put somebody in here. I get past the top 12 teams, and I don't really want to rank anymore, to be honest with you. I'm not real impressed with a lot of these teams. Here's the problem. Now, you and I can look at this and say, yeah, if Georgia beats Alabama or LSU, then they deserve to be number one over Clemson when those college football play, because Clemson will have beaten a bad team, a Pittsburgh, or somebody like that. It doesn't matter what we think. Okay, there might even be a computer out there, computer strength that shows What matters is what these people that do the voting think, these 13 people. Georgia plays 3 of the 6 teams that have a sitting athletic director on the College Football Playoff Committee. So do we think that Florida is going to move Georgia into – before I go any further, why is it important? You might say, well, who cares? If they're in the playoff, they're in the playoff. Okay, well, here's why it matters. The number 1 team gets to play at the site that's closest to them. If Clemson is number 1, the site that's closest to Clemson is Atlanta. The other site is Phoenix or Glendale. So somebody's going to get shipped out to Arizona. You want to be number 1 if you're Georgia. You don't want to go out and play in Arizona. We just saw that. We saw that act 2 years ago. We watched Georgia get shipped out to Los Angeles on a 5-hour plane ride and play Baker Mayfield in Oklahoma in overtime in one of the games of the ages, while Alabama got a 45-minute flight to New Orleans to play a cruddy Clemson team. They didn't break a sweat. I covered that game. It was lopsided from the start. Clemson was never in contention 2 years ago. Meanwhile, Georgia goes out there and puts their heart on the line, and Charlie Warner breaks his leg, and everybody's exhausted. They lose a day of preparation before the national title game, and Alabama beats them in double overtime. You go, wait a minute. How did Alabama end up with an easier path? They didn't even play in the SEC title game. We'll save that for another show. The location of the playoff games does matter. You want to play close to home. If Georgia's playing in Atlanta as the number 1 seed, that's a big difference than playing out in Arizona against the number 3 team. You know who the number 4 team's going to be? Or the number 3 team's going to be? 3 or 4? It's going to be Ohio State. It's going to be Ohio State. Ohio State's not going to lose a game this year until they get to the college football playoff. Another one to mark down. I don't think if you're Georgia that you want to start out with Ohio State. I think you'd rather have the 4 seed, who I think will be probably a 1-loss Big 12 team, be it Texas or Oklahoma. I think Georgia can handle either one of those teams. Ohio State, I think they can handle them too. I just don't think Georgia wants to sign up for that drama in their first playoff game. But most importantly, Georgia needs to be playing in Atlanta. That's where they want to play. And as I look at this college football playoff committee, you've heard me talk about it before. You already know that the Oklahoma AD is on there because that, to me, I won't get into last year, but the Oklahoma AD is on there. We know the Florida AD is on there. We know the Georgia Tech AD is on there, okay? R.C. Slocum is not the AD at Texas A&M, but he coached there, and he's on the committee. Now, this is the intriguing name that I'm going to throw out there, and you probably don't know this name, but you should, and that is the newest member of the college, one of the newest members of the College Football Playoff Committee, and he is the athletic director at Arkansas State. I thought that was pretty interesting here. I'm looking at an old College Football Playoff Committee. So Terry Majahar is his name. That's his name, Terry Majahar. And here's my question. If you're Georgia and you're playing Terry Mohajir. If you're playing Arkansas State and you know their AD is going to be at the game, now obviously you're going to want to make sure he's got good food and drink in the skybox. But if you're Kirby Smart, does that play a factor into how many points you score or whether or not you run up the score? I think it's already played a factor. Or maybe Kirby's just trying to sell tickets when he told us yesterday how great Arkansas State was, how impressive they were. Boy, this is a really good football team. They did beat UNLV. I don't know how good a team they are. I know that this Terry Mohajir has done a great job as an AD. I did some research on him, and he's raised their budget from like $16 to $41 million. I know they got the largest budget in the Sun Belt Conference, but at the end of the day, they're still a Sun Belt team. At the end of the day, Georgia's still a 31-point favorite. But if it's midway through the fourth quarter and you're Georgia, are you still throwing the football? Are you telling Kirby, you got somebody up in the skybox saying, hey, can somebody keep an eye on Terry Mohajir? If he starts to look upset, we're going to start running the clock. Okay, that's a bit of a stretch. But the fact of the matter is that politics do matter in this. And it's not, to me, it's not as simple as Georgia going undefeated if Clemson goes undefeated. And that's a storyline for way down the line. Georgia's got to win a lot of football games between now and then. But as I look ahead, and I do look ahead and try and predict, I see Georgia right now. I mean, if you don't have your reservations and your tickets for the SEC championship game, I don't know what to tell you because Georgia's going to be there. I mean, I cannot see a scenario where Georgia is not playing in the SEC championship game because the East is crumbling. East made a good statement last year. They went 9-6 against the West. That's not going to happen this year. Okay, Kentucky's quarterback's gone. South Carolina quarterback gone. Florida's Florida. Tennessee's Jeremy Pruitt's calling the Titanic. Vanderbilt's already in your rearview mirror, and then they go lay down against Purdue. Don't know how to explain that one. I thought Vandy was better than that. Missouri, to me, the biggest threat, the show-me state, and they haven't shown me enough to think that they're a serious threat. I just think they're the biggest threat. Jesse McCall, as I go to questions here. Jesse, what are your concerns or maybe lack of concerns with Stetson Bennett in a worst-case scenario? Can he handle it? He can handle winning the East. I don't think he could handle winning the SEC championship game. Not impressed. Can't throw a pick six against a FCS school. Can't stare down your receiver. I thought a lot more of Stetson Bennett than that. That was really disappointing. You can't make those mistakes. Need to see. John Anthony says South Carolina has a good new quarterback. I agree. He's talented. He has not been tested yet. He will not have enough experience under his belt to handle the likes of Nolan Smith, Jermaine Johnson, Azeez Ojulari, Nakobe Dean, Monty Rice, and hopefully by then Malik will be playing. Kathy Green says, I don't think so. I don't think we'll change our game or our politics. Coach has shown he's not about blowing opponents out. Kathy, I would agree with that. Kirby does not run up the score. But my thought now is, do you need Stetson Bennett to be throwing the football more in the fourth quarter? Do you need to develop Stetson Bennett? I mean, you want to get Jake out of there, right? We know this. We want Jake out of the game if we're Georgia. You don't want Jake getting hit any more than he has to. He was out after 7 series against Murray State. I'd say he might play 8. Maybe Jake plays the first. Maybe he plays the first series of the third quarter. I don't expect that though. So maybe you need Stetson in there. Stetson needs reps, okay? Or maybe he's not the guy. Maybe it's the walk-on. I don't know. But right now, the Georgia quarterback situation is not a good one. The backup quarterback situation is not a good one. When Georgia beats Notre Dame, do you think that will eliminate the Irish from the college football playoff? Not necessarily, but I don't think this is a Notre Dame team capable of making the college football playoff. Can Michigan State knock off Ohio State? Chris wants to know. Answer, no. I know a lot about Michigan State, probably more than I should. I went to school there, but I also covered the program, and I still got friends there. Their offense is horrible. It's horrible. It's horrible. The defense is good. The defense is good enough to cause problems, but it's going to take a torrential downpour or bad weather game. I saw that happen a few years ago in Columbus when Michigan State went in there and beat him and knocked off Ezekiel Elliott. They held him to 33 yards rushing. The Michigan State defense is great, but this offense that they have is just terrible. And so, no, they're not going to beat Ohio State. You agree with Miriam. If you play Ohio State in the playoff, it'll be priced off, Steve says. Man, Steve, Georgia-Ohio State playoff game. The drama. That's why I said Georgia doesn't need that to beat. Now, if they play them in the national championship game, great. All right? That would be a poetic climax to the season, right? But not in the first playoff game. You don't want to play Ohio State. That's way too much drama, way too much emotion, way too many distractions for the first playoff game. I do think Ohio State will be there. I do think Justin Fields will be a finalist for the Heisman Trophy also. That offense is made for him, and he doesn't have a lot of competition in the Big Ten. What do I think of Maryland, Ohio State? I like Ohio State. I'm not convinced Maryland's that good. I think Syracuse is that bad. Although I do think Syracuse will cover their spread this week against Clemson, but I'm not sold on Maryland. Sorry, I know that Byrd Stadium or Capital One Field can be a tough place to play, but I think that was more about Syracuse than it was Maryland. Josh Campbell says Kenny Mack looks Saturday. Will he get more touches in the future? That depends on Kenny Mack. Kenny Mack's got to get it done on special teams. He's got to show that killer, that dog instinct that Kirby wants to see in coverages. Kenny can do that. He played safety in high school. When do you see him? Does he get more touches? At whose expense? So maybe this is another game where Swift, this weekend against Arkansas State, where Swift gets 5 to 7 carries. You saw that Kirby showed us how he was going to manage Brian Herrien. He only gave him 5 carries. That's a compliment to Brian Herrien. That shows that Kirby's got value for Brian Herrien. He's not going to burn Brian Herrien up. Going to give the young guys, give them some work, break them in. We saw more Zamir White. Zamir led the Bulldogs in rushing, got his first touchdown. That was a big step forward for Zamir. I like the way Zamir runs, the powerful style, the forward lean. It's prolific. I want to see more from him. He needs to evolve. Like to see him, break outside a little bit more. I know he attacks defenders, but I'd like to see him get to the sideline and turn it up, or break outside once he gets to that second level. But boy, he is all north and south. Impressive, powerful runner. And James Cook is probably the most explosive guy on the team, and that's a mouthful when you got guys like George Pickens and Demetrius Robertson and DeAndre Swift. But Cook he floats. It's like his feet don't touch the ground. And Nate McBride was talking about him yesterday, how Cook just changes direction effortlessly and without losing any speed, and that's an NFL trait is what that is. And then Swift, Swift looks like an NFL back. He runs with authority. DeAndre still with that great cutback ability and acceleration, but running with more authority than I've seen from him. Really like what I see from him. Anxious to see the first 20-carry DeAndre Swift game. That'll be the knockdown drag out, and I think Swift is the kind of guy that will do better in the second half than the first half. He's got great vision, but he's just got a great feel for the whole. So what we've seen from DeAndre, 10 yards of carry is impressive. He will get even better as games wear down and Georgia gets challenged enough where Kirby keeps him in the third and fourth quarter. Let's take a look here. Tim says, good morning, Dog Nation. Back from 3 days of work in the Bahamas. Tim, bless you. I hope everything went well for you down there. Region was incredibly struck hard by that hurricane. Feel bad for all the folks down there. Don't start bad mouthing the kid. Are we talking recruiting on here? Don't start talking bad about recruits. I mean, you know what? Here's the thing, Georgia's got such a I can't, looking at Georgia from the outside in, as I did for many years covering different SEC teams. Georgia has such a classy reputation. Jeff Sentell sent out this cover 4 the other day, and it was, what does Vince Dooley mean to you? And what he meant to me, watching teams play Coach Dooley, is just class. Just class and dignity. And when you look at the University of Georgia and you look at the Georgia football programs, you think about class and dignity. And Mark Richt, I thought, was a gentleman as well. And I know that opens this wide open for a joke. Jim Donnan was a little rough, right? Coach Donnan, he tick off a few people. He's a feisty guy. Won some football games too. It might have been the right tonic at the right time. But for the most part, when you think about Georgia football, looking at Georgia football from the outside looking in, they're universally respected. I think Georgia is one of the most respected schools, not just in the SEC, but in the country. I think it has a lot to do with the leadership, but I also think it has a lot to do with the football program. And whether academians like to admit it or not, the football program is the front porch to the university. A lot of what we feel about universities is based on what we see from their football program. Like, for example, Miami, right? You think about Miami and the Canes and all, and then you go down to the campus and you go, this does not match. I mean, that campus, it looks like, gardens and, beautiful. And you're like, this is where this rough program, that doesn't really match. But Georgia and Vince Dooley and class and dignity. So I say this because social media has become a new front porch. Actually, let's say this. Social media is the back porch, right? Sometimes, you got your neighbors, you can see in their backyard, they don't mow it, or the kids are playing on a swing, looks like it's about to break, and you're afraid you're going to hear some kids screaming going through the air into your yard. Look, the back porch, right? Social media, if football is the front porch, social media is the back porch. You don't really want to see it, but you do. You don't really want to hear the dog barking next door, but you can, right? Georgia social media is mostly good. It's better than most programs. Don't need to go down that road if you're a Georgia fan, because right now you've got everything you want. I think you got everything you want. I think you've got the coach that you want. I think you've got the stadium that you want. I think you've got a destination city that you want in Athens. I think that this new football building, this new $80 million football building, this is going to help bring Georgia up to par with the other programs they're competing with. And I hear some, you don't need all that. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Well, you got one of the best. You do have one of the best. But you didn't hire Kirby Smart, and you didn't recruit these players to be some of the best. You recruited them to be the best. You recruited them to be number one. Okay, now, there may have been an era, as I said, where Georgia fans were content winning 8 or 9 games and going on an annual vacation in Jacksonville. That may have been the way it was, and that might have been cool with everybody. But where Georgia is right now with Kirby Smart is on the brink of a national championship. And there's only one thing that's going to satisfy, and that's a national title. That's it. So you do want the best facilities. You do want the best players. You do want the most conducive situation for recruiting. And don't say, oh, well, he recruits good enough. He doesn't need that. You want that Florida game at home if you're Kirby Smart, because that's your best recruiting weekend every other year. What program would give that away? Is Michigan going to play Ohio State and Cincinnati every year? Is Alabama going to play LSU in New Orleans every year? No, not going to happen. So this is just another step for Kirby Smart. And that's why I say, when we talk about social media, we talk about Georgia fans and what they say, they don't need to say anything. Georgia is in the catbird seat. Meanwhile, Alabama's over there, and they got to worry about LSU. And LSU's got to worry about Alabama. And Alabama's got to worry about Auburn. And Auburn's got to worry about Alabama. And Auburn's got to worry about LSU. And LSU's got to... And Georgia's just sitting back in the East going, who's out? Who's out? What? Whose quarterback went down today? Today it's Kentucky? Yesterday it's South Carolina? What about Missouri? Oh, yeah, they lost at Wyoming. Vanderbilt already played them. Tennessee, Titanic, according to the head coach. Florida, Felipe Franks. What zip code is his brain in this week? I mean, so if you're Georgia, it's cool. You don't got to attack anybody. You don't got to throw darts. You don't got to defend. You got the most competitive coach out there in the game right now. 43-year-old Kirby, 43 years old. This guy is only 43 years old. Now, he's 43 going on about 60 from the wisdom that I hear from Kirby Smart every week. And he's got one goal. Now, he might talk a little bit about golf, but he didn't talk about anything else but championships, right? I mean, you talk about dialed in, whether it's Kirby confrontational Monday or Kirby cool on Tuesday, at the end of the day, the script is the same. It's what did they do to get better? It's where can they get better? There's no complacency. Kirby's told you that. And he gave you some good life advice while he's at it. It challenges me, right? It should challenge you. Kirby says you're complacent? That's called retirement. You don't get complacent until you retire. I mean, listening to Kirby Smart, you can really gain some valuable things, and you can understand why these Bulldogs play the way they play and play with as much, I would say, attention to detail as they have and are as focused, because the head coach won't accept anything less. We go out there for practices, he's screaming. You can hear his voice over the speakers. He's calling out different players. You look this way on this play. Can't use that word. But he's going to make sure that everybody stays on top of their game. They got that GPS tracker on the guys. Everybody's looking to run the fastest numbers that they can. They're kind of competing with each other. I started the show talking about guys like Nate McBride that embrace their role, that want to make teammates better. I mean, this is a great situation. So keep your back porch clean. Don't throw the garbage out there on social media. If you're Georgia, you don't need to. You are in a great position. The SEC East is crumbling around you every day. Let's see if we got any questions before I close this one out. You're watching the Ingles on the Beat segment. We do this every Tuesday. I appreciate Ingles sponsorship. They do a great job. I had a live appearance last Friday at the Ingles in Hall, Georgia, just outside of Athens. This store had it all. I loved it. Had a great time. Hope if you get a chance, you can visit that Ingles in Hall, Georgia. Really appreciated the folks out there for making me welcome, and appreciate all the Georgia fans that showed up. Had a chance to talk football afterward and whisper some secrets. Miriam Corbin, have you all seen the copycat stuff Florida's doing? Flashlight light up. Okay, you're on the topic of copycatting. So I'm just going to say this, and I need to talk to McGarity about this. We saw how Georgia can light up the stadium red, and we won't see it this weekend, obviously, because they got a noon kickoff. The Alabama fans are really mad about this. They think Georgia copied them. And I'm thinking, look, LED lighting has been around for a while here. I don't know who did it first. Maybe, because Alabama turned their lights on first. I don't know how much of a quote-unquote copycat it was. My guess is it was technology that became available, and the company went around saying, anybody want to afford this? And Georgia raised their hand and said, yeah, that looks cool. We'll do it. And Alabama raised their hand and said, yeah, we'll do it. I don't know who had the first lighting stand up and whose LED system worked. I don't know who played. It's like arguing, hey, I played that song before you did. You're copying me. Who cares? I mean, I don't know. I don't see Pete Williams says he doesn't see Arkansas State scoring more than 10 or 14 points on the defense. Pete, I'd agree. Remember, Murray State only scored 10. 7 of those points came off the Stetson Bennett pick 6. Chris Branham, I'm surprised we all haven't gotten fired for not getting our work done because of Dog Nation Daily. I'll tell you, Brandon Adams does such a great job with that. Well, here's why. Your boss watching it. He's watching it too. That's why he's not checking up on you, because he's in his office watching Brandon on Dog Nation Daily every day. Denethan Henderson says they showed the Pickens catch from preseason. You got mossed. I'll tell you, George Pickens is unbelievable. We're going to see more. Can't wait to see more from George Pickens. Kevin Lee says, I don't mind these games against, you say FBS, I think you mean FCS team. Actually, Arkansas State is an FBS team. I think you're talking about you don't mind seeing Georgia play these lesser teams. It is a good polish. It is a good warm-up. It does give players a chance to play, and that is healthy for the locker room. It also gives young players a chance to emerge, or in the case of Stetson Bennett, to show you that he needs more work, right? When you get exposed, you hear basketball coaches, and when I covered Tom Izzo, you look at Michigan State basketball schedule, and I'm using this as a comparison. Why does Michigan State's basketball schedule so hard at the beginning of the season? And the answer is because Tom Izzo wants to get exposed. He wants to know right out of the gate what his team's weaknesses are. He wants to see how the best teams are going to attack his team, and he wants to find out about his players. And in basketball, it's cool because you can lose 10, 12, 14 games and still win a national title, right? Football is a little different. You don't have that margin for error. So instead of playing these great teams earlier and getting exposed and maybe risking getting beat, you play the weak teams so that you can play the young guys and build depth. And then in practice, you put your ones on your ones. And that's what Kirby Smart does a lot of at Georgia. Georgia will play their first-team offense against their first-team defense quite a bit every week, in fact, in practice. Now, it's not tackle to the ground, but it's stud, which is everything but go to the ground. That's how Georgia does it. So, Kevin, you have a good point there. We've been able to see a lot of these young Georgia players emerge. I'm sure that Kirby's got a lot of teach tape. And again, give Murray State credit. I was on here saying last week it was the worst press conference by a 7-touchdown underdog I ever saw. I still think it was a bad press conference by a 7-touchdown underdog, but they backed it up. They backed it up with effort, and they gave Kirby some teach tape. They did enough good things with that 60-yard touchdown, with the pick six. They did enough good things that Georgia learned and gained from that game, and Mitch Stewart and his racers went home happy too because they were tied for one quarter with Georgia, and that's something they'll tell their grandkids about. Let's take a look here. Any other questions? Questions before we go. Havoc rate, 30% this week. Dante Green says, here's the thing, Dante, that depends on the other team. How often is Arkansas State going to be throwing the ball? Are they going to take 3-step drops and throw it right away like Murray did? Or are they going to take 5 or 7? Can Georgia strip the ball and force turnovers? What type of effort will we see from Arkansas State in the third and fourth quarter? Will they play as hard as Murray State did? I don't think that's a given. Who do I think was the best defensive player last Saturday? Miriam wants to know. Boy, that's tough because there were so many different guys that played. And the substitutions were ample. I couldn't help but be impressed with Nolan Smith. Loved what he did. Sack and a half. I think that was Georgia's best sack effort under Kirby Smart. If Connor Riley's, if I'm not mistaken, I think Connor had that in his story on Sunday on Nolan Smith. So I would say Nolan Smith. Watching him bull rush and get his first career sack was impressive. Like the way guys say. I like the way, again, I'm high on Tyson Campbell right now. I think Tyson Campbell's off to a great start this season. I saw him clean up and make some really nice plays coming up in run support. Michael Kierce wants to know my Final Four as of today. I'm going to say Georgia, LSU, Ohio State, and Oklahoma. Because I think Georgia beats Alabama in the SEC championship game, and I think LSU gets in with one loss as an at-large. I don't think there'll be a Pac-12 team that'll run the table. Utah right now is undefeated. I think they'll eventually lose. Wait a minute. I didn't leave Clemson out, did I? I might have to start again. Clemson, Georgia, LSU, Ohio State. There we go. I'm going to squeeze out the Big 12 team. I think Oklahoma and Texas are going to knock each other off. And look, I know the Oklahoma AD is on the selection committee, but you can only pull that act once, right? I mean, it was only last year people were convinced Oklahoma, oh my gosh, they deserved it. They were down 28-0 to Alabama after 17 minutes. I'm watching this game. I'm going, they're down 28-0 after. Who in that room voted? Here's what happened. Nobody voted them in. They couldn't reach a decision, so they fell back on protocol in the conference champion. That's what happened. That's how Oklahoma got in. Not going to happen again. Fool me once, shame on me. Or fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Not going to happen. Clemson, yes, Andrew, Clemson is in. Clemson's undefeated this year. Clemson's in. Georgia's in. LSU's in. And Ohio State is in. That's my floor. I know everybody's got a different floor for different reasons, but I just don't see Ohio State losing. Folks, I'm going to wrap it up. I've got to get back to Athens. The Bulldogs are going to be practicing this afternoon. Kirby is going to be talking to the media afterward. Myself, Connor Riley, we're both going to be there. giving you a ton of coverage, talking about a lot more of these young players that are emerging. You're going to want to check out Dog Nation. Some really good stories already up today. A George Pickens story that gives you some more insight into George. That's on the website right now. The Nate McBride story with some video of Nate. You can really get a feel for this kid. I think you're really going to like what he's all about and what he brings. And then the Nolan Smith story. And Nolan Smith is just an absolute phenom unfolding before our eyes. So everyone have a great Tuesday. Thank you for joining me on the Ingles on the Beat program. And thanks to Ingles for the sponsorship. Appreciate the support.